As I think about the suffering that Jesus endured on the cross, my first thought is to think about the intensity of the pain Jesus experienced in a punishment that, by all rights, I should have received. I'll come back to that in a moment, but I think it's important for us to remember that when Jesus was crucified on that day, the crowds who were gathered and even his own disciples weren't thinking about Jesus' death in terms of it being an atoning sacrifice for our sins. No, they looked at Jesus' death as being the end of their dreams. I sort of referenced this yesterday, but the cross was the ultimate destiny for anyone who tried to lead a rebellion against Rome. The Romans killed Jesus on a cross because he claimed to be the king of the Jews. That is why he was crucified next to two other men who, although they are sometimes referred to as criminals, were actually rebels and insurrectionists. This is why it also helps us to understand that this is why we also need to understand why Jesus was beaten and mocked so severely by the Roman soldiers. It wasn't just that they were sadists who loved to abuse other people, although they probably were sadists. No, they flogged Jesus and ridiculed him as part of a larger agenda. They were sending a clear message to anyone else in Jerusalem who might consider defying the authority of Rome. If you challenge Caesar, you will suffer Caesar's wrath. Of course, although Pilate and the Roman soldiers might have thought that they were in control of what was happening to Jesus, they thought they were the ones who were in control of Jesus' execution. We recognize that Jesus willingly and voluntarily went to the cross, where he received the punishment for our sin. Going all the way back to the Garden of Eden, Jesus' Father had been working to redeem his people from their sin. In Genesis chapter 3, he had promised to one day send a representative who would crush the evil one and make a new way, a new bridge back into the kind of fellowship that God had always desired to have with his people. Throughout the Old Testament, this representative was described in greater and greater detail. The Jews used the term Messiah to describe him because he would be the anointed one. That's what the word Messiah means. He would be the anointed one by God who would redeem the people from their sins. And yet, according to our passage, Jesus was mocked and insulted by the very people he had come to save. The Jewish religious leaders looked at Jesus on the cross and thought it was evidence that Jesus lacked power. But the reality is that it was evidence of Jesus' commitment to his Father and his love for us. I'm reminded of Jesus' words recorded in John 10, verses 17 and 18. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. When we look at the cross, we need to remember how much Jesus was willing to suffer on our behalf. During this study, we've often talked about the cost of discipleship and that we must be willing to take up our cross. But we must never forget that Jesus paid a far greater price than we will ever pay, so that we may have a life far greater than we ever deserved. There is a price that we must pay to be Jesus' disciple, but when we look at the cross, we are reminded that it is a small price relative to how large our reward will be. As Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 5:21, God made him who had no sin to become sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. That's a thought for us to consider this weekend. God bless you guys. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.